It began on a Thursday morning, early, too early for the type of phone call that forces your mind to immediately assess whether this is good news, bad news, or the preamble to something that will take more from you than it gives. I was in the middle of slicing bread, the thick, crusty kind from the bakery 2 blocks away that still remembered what real dough was supposed to taste like, when my mobile rang, vibrating against the kitchen counter. The screen lit up with a name I saw far less often than I should have, and liked even less than I admitted: Nathan. My son-in-law. Patrick, he chirped when I picked up, like we were old college friends reconnecting. Nathan, I said, flatly, wiping my hand on a kitchen towel. How are you? All well. I'm fine. I kept my tone even. Is there something you need? He let out that forced little chuckle of his. Straight to the point, as always. I like that about you. I said nothing. Listen, my parents have arrived. From France. They flew in yesterday, and we're hosting a little dinner tomorrow evening. Very intimate. Just family. They're eager to meet everyone, especially you. Are they? Yes, of course, he said quickly, as if startled by the idea that I might doubt their interest. We're doing it at our place, 7:30 sharp. Dress nicely, something formal. My parents are a bit old school. You know how the French can be. I see. I walked over to the window. The street outside was empty except for an old man walking a dog that didn't want to be walked. Why didn't Camille call me? A pause. Barely perceptible, but it was there. She doesn't know I'm calling, he admitted. She's been all over the place with the kids, planning, working. Honestly, she probably just forgot. I turned away from the window. Camille is many things. Forgetful isn't one of them. Nathan was quiet. Still, I said, after a beat, thank you for the invitation. There was relief in his voice. Great. Really great. We'll see you tomorrow then. I hung up and stood there. The bread remained half-sliced on the counter. The butter was beginning to sweat in the summer air. But I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, at the name, at the last call logged. Nathan, there was something about his tone that had bothered me, not what he said, but how he said it. Like it had cost him something to make that call. Like I was being summoned out of obligation. That, or they needed something from me. The next day moved slowly. I spent the morning in my garden, trimming the hedges and watering the herbs, though the soil was still damp from last night's rain. It was busy work, and I knew it. I wasn't trying to improve the garden. I was trying to quiet my mind. By 3, I was inside again, showered, shaving with more care than usual. I wore a crisp shirt, dark navy slacks, a gray blazer that still fit like it had when I bought it a decade ago in Paris. They said dress nicely, and I did. By 7, I was on their street, a neighborhood too new, too glossy, too flat for its own good. Every house looked the same, like someone had photocopied architecture. Their front door opened before I rang the bell. Camille stood there, surprised. Or trying to look surprised. Dad, she said. You came. I smiled softly. Nathan invited me. Yes, he mentioned it this morning. I was going to call, but you forgot. I offered. She winced, just slightly. I'm glad you're here. Inside, the place smelled like butter, garlic, and something else rich, maybe lamb or duck. French cuisine. Nathan's voice rang out from the kitchen, cheerful and loud, a different man from the one on the phone. The table was set beautifully. Polished silverware, cloth napkins, candles already lit. His parents were seated already. Luke and Marianne. Slim, elegant, and perfectly aloof in that Parisian way that felt both graceful and mildly insulting. Nathan introduced me as the father-in-law, a man of quiet tastes, which earned a few polite smiles. Luke extended a hand. Enchanté, he said. We were very curious about you. Likewise, I said. They exchanged glances, then switched to French, assuming, of course, that I didn't understand a word. I didn't respond. Just sat, nodded, listened. Because I did understand. I had lived in France for 5 years in my 40s. Bordeaux. I'd even taught at a lycée. But that wasn't information I ever volunteered, especially not to Nathan. The evening began well enough. The first course was foie gras on toast, paired with a white wine I didn't recognize. The conversation floated around work, travel, Camille's childhood, and then it shifted. In French ILS Telmont, provincial, Marianne murmured to her husband, eyes flicking toward me. Luc smirked. Oui, on dirait tu as a mise son seul costume propre. Le pauvre. Nathan chuckled. Mais il fait un effort non? Il veut impressioner. C'est mignon. They laughed softly, sipping wine, as if I were a dog that had been taught to sit upright at the table. Camille didn't catch any of it. She'd never been good with languages. And I said nothing, just kept eating. They continued. Tu crois tu il comprendre quan est moque de lui? Luc asked. Bien sûr que non, Nathan said. Il pense qu'on parle de vin. That earned another round of chuckles. I kept chewing. Slowly. Deliberately. The main course arrived cassoulet, rich and heavy. The wine grew darker, deeper. The mockery quieter, more subtle. But it didn't stop. They laughed at my shoes, my manner of speaking, the way I held my fork. All in French. All under the assumption that I was nothing but a prop in their play. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Because some things are better left unsaid until the moment you choose to say them. The next morning, I wrote a letter. I placed it in an envelope. Inside was something Nathan hadn't expected. A translated transcript. Word for word. Every sentence they had uttered. Every joke. Every insult. With footnotes. And at the end, a single line in French. Je vous entends depuis toujours. ETJ attend le bon moment. I mailed it and waited it would have taken so little. A simple question. A moment of genuine interest. A single afternoon spent asking, not assuming. If Nathan had ever bothered to truly speak to me, not just at me, he might have learned things that now made his smug laughter and whispered jokes look even more ridiculous than they had at that dinner table. If he had asked, he might have known that I speak French. Fluently. Not the high school French one uses to order a croissant in Paris and feel worldly about it, but actual, lived-in, day-to-day fluency that only comes from living among the people, from working there, from loving a place not for its charm, but for its rhythm. I speak it the way Parisians argue and poets confess, not like a tourist, but like someone who once called it home. In my 40s, after my consulting firm hit a profitable stride, I took a contract in Bordeaux. What started as a 6-month agreement turned into 5 years. I bought an apartment on Rue de la Course, learned to drink wine without checking the label, and built a business that still sends me dividends to this day. I wasn't just visiting France. I was part of its ecosystem. I spoke the language with clients, vendors, accountants, and when I traveled to Paris or Toulouse, I fit in enough that no one ever asked me where I was from. But Nathan never asked. Not once. Over the years, I'd tried, in subtle ways, to open the door. Mentioned my time abroad, spoke occasionally of the vineyards, the tempo of the southern cities, the cultural differences I loved. Camille used to enjoy those stories, back when she still visited just to talk, before marriage and children turned conversations into logistics. Nathan, on the other hand, always found a reason to change the subject. He was never rude, just dismissive. Politely uninterested. The kind of man who smiled a lot but didn't listen. Who shook your hand firmly but looked just past your eyes. Nathan had a talent for cordial distance. He knew I had once worked in business. That much was clear. But beyond that, I don't think he ever made the effort to understand what kind of man I had been in my professional prime. In his mind, I was simply retired. An older man. Camille's father. End of story. To be fair, I never imagined he was the kind to concern himself with my past. He didn't need to. Nathan and Camille both had good careers, respectable jobs, a steady income. They weren't after my money, which, for a time, I thought was a good thing. I remember the wedding like it happened last week. The way they had planned every detail. The venue, the music, the food, all meticulously arranged. Camille had handled it with her usual precision, and Nathan had nodded along, managing the budget and smiling in the right places. When it came time to talk about financing the whole thing, I had handed them a check. It wasn't a modest gift. I had written 6 figures without hesitation. Not because they needed it, but because I wanted to. Because it meant something to me that my daughter start her marriage without debt hanging over her. Because it was my way of saying I approved, or at least accepted, the life she had chosen. I had never been an overly sentimental man, but I wanted Camille to feel secure, to feel backed, to feel, even at 30, that her father still had her in mind. Nathan had stared at the number and whistled. "You've been saving this your whole life?" he asked, grinning like it was a joke. And I, ever the gentleman, smiled back and said, something like that. He didn't ask where the money came from. Didn't wonder how a man who lived modestly, drove an aging Volvo, and took his vacations in the same cabin every year could write a check like that without blinking. He didn't even ask what I had done for work, not really. The wedding was lovely, and after that, the check was forgotten. He never brought it up again. And I never told him, because some people don't want to know. They're satisfied with the surface, with assumptions. Nathan had decided who I was the moment he shook my hand. An aging man, a polite father-in-law, a footnote to his life. That was all he needed. So when he sat there at that dinner, making jokes in French with his parents about my suit, my voice, my very existence, he did so from a place of total confidence. Because he thought I was deaf to it. Because he thought I was beneath it. And that is the real insult. Not the jokes themselves, but the certainty that I wouldn't understand. But I did. And I remembered every word. I remembered the rhythm of their snide remarks, the cadence of their laughter. The way they leaned toward each other, confident in their shared language and in the silence they assumed from me. It wasn't just what they said. It was what it revealed, their comfort, their assurance that I wasn't really there, not in the way that mattered. I was background noise. If Nathan had taken the time to listen, really listen, he would have heard me speak French to Camille once on the phone. He would have caught the titles of the French books I kept on my shelf, the travel guides to Montpellier and Marseille, the memoirs from my years abroad. He would have seen the brass plate on my old suitcase with the Bordeaux address. But that would require attention. And Nathan never paid attention. It's not that he was a bad man. I want to make that clear. He was competent, responsible, polite. He provided well. He treated Camille with respect. But he was incurious. And that, more than anything, made him dangerous in small ways. He was the kind of man who didn't hurt you out of malice, but out of disregard. He didn't care enough to wound you intentionally, but he also didn't care enough to avoid it. I've met men like that all my life. In boardrooms, on golf courses, in investment meetings. Men who believed the world was only as wide as their own experience and as deep as their own ambition. Men who smiled, nodded, and dismissed. But I had never imagined that one of those men would marry my daughter. After that dinner, after the envelope was sent, I found myself thinking more and more about what it meant to be seen. Not just looked at, but understood. Known. I thought about the people in my life who had truly seen me, my late wife, a few close friends from the France years, a professor from my college days. And I thought about how rare that feeling had become. I wasn't bitter. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. A recognition, maybe, that time was passing and with it the likelihood that I would ever be seen again in that way. Except, perhaps, by Camille. If I was honest, there had been a time when she saw me clearly. As a little girl, she had been sharp, observant, emotionally attuned. She had asked questions. She had wanted stories. But over the years, something had changed. Her world became more frantic, more about function and outcomes. She didn't ask as many questions anymore. She didn't have time for stories. Or maybe she just assumed she already knew them. And that, more than anything, was the heartbreak of aging. Not the body wearing down, not the silence of the house, not the calendar filled with fewer plans, but the slow erasure of your identity in the eyes of the people who once saw you best. But Nathan's mistake had done something else. It had reminded me who I was. And I wasn't done yet. The letter I had mailed was only the beginning. Inside the envelope, beneath the translated transcript of their French conversation, I had included a small card. It read, "When people show you who they are, believe them. But never let them believe you are less than who you are." No signature. I wanted him to guess. Or rather, to realize. What he does next, that's his choice. But what I do now, that's mine. Camille never caught on. Not once. She sat between her husband and his mother, smiling, sipping wine, nodding along with the kind of patient politeness reserved for those who want to appear more fluent than they are. But she wasn't fluent. Not in French. Not even conversational. She could understand the basics, ask for directions, read a menu, but what was happening at the table that evening, the cutting remarks laced with elegance and dipped in sarcasm, was far beyond her reach. And perhaps that was part of the design. I watched her smile at her father-in-law, Luc, as he explained something about a Bordeaux estate he once owned. She nodded, said, "We," and laughed when everyone else did. But she didn't know why they laughed. She didn't realize that her father had been the punchline. Again. Luc and Marianne were the kind of French people I had learned to avoid while living there, polished, proud, and quietly ruthless. They carried their heritage like a sword, thin and sharp, used not for defense, but for subtle domination. Their words came gently, with cadence, dressed in the neutral tone of civility, but the blade was there in every sentence. I should have left earlier, but I stayed. I watched. I watched Camille lean in to ask Nathan what was so funny. He smiled, waved her off with a kiss on the cheek, and whispered, "Nothing, Sherry, just my parents being silly." Silly. That's what he called the mockery, the commentary about the way I held my wine glass or used a French phrase just slightly off accent. They had laughed at my pronunciation of civet as if I had said a curse word. I hadn't, of course. I had said it correctly. Luc knew that. So did Marianne. But they laughed anyway. Nathan laughed because they did. After dessert, a well-executed tarte tatin prepared by a caterer, not by anyone at the table, Camille finally excused herself to tend to the children, who were upstairs with a babysitter. It was only after she left that the conversation truly shed its skin. Marianne poured herself more wine. Her voice lowered. "Il est toujours assez sérieux," she said, casting a glance at me. "Comme un personnage d'un roman triste." Luc chuckled. "Je crois qu'il pense qu'il fait partie de notre monde." Nathan smiled, but said nothing. "Et vest," Marianne added, shaking her head, "tellement provincial." "C'est un monsieur du vieux temps," Luc said. "Un homme de notre époque." And then Nathan finally contributed, murmuring, "Mais il a fait un effort." "C'est si que compte." "Un effort," Marianne repeated with a smirk. "Comme un enfant qui met un crève pour impressionner son instituteur." They all laughed. I sat motionless. I wanted to speak, wanted to tell them, in perfect French, that I heard every word, that I understood not just the language, but the intent behind it. But something inside me held back. Perhaps pride, perhaps strategy, perhaps the simple truth that some people only learn when they are confronted with themselves, not with an argument. So I finished my wine. I thanked them all for the evening. I kissed Camille goodnight and told her to call me soon. She promised she would. And then I left. The night air was cold as I walked down their pristine suburban street. The kind of neighborhood where the grass is cut with military precision and no one parks on the street unless they have guests. My breath clouded before me. My shoes echoed against the pavement. Back at my house, the warmth didn't comfort me. The silence felt different this time, heavier. I took off my coat slowly, like someone carrying a weight. I sat in my armchair and let the evening play back in my head. The way Nathan had looked at me when I tried to compliment the wine in French. The way his parents had smiled, nodded, and then shared a look. The way Marianne had adjusted her pearl necklace, as if even the presence of an outsider had made it twist incorrectly. I'd known people like that in France. Known them and avoided them. But I never expected them to be at my daughter's table. And I never expected her to be blind to it. But how could she have known? She never learned the language. Never wanted to. Her French had come from an elective in college and a summer vacation in Lyon. It was enough to pass as educated, but not enough to survive a dinner like this one. She hadn't realized they were laughing at me. She hadn't noticed how Nathan had smiled more after she left. That's what stung the most. Not the insults. Not even the laughter. But the way Nathan changed when she was gone. Without Camille there, he didn't need to pretend. Without her, he didn't need to act like I mattered. And that, more than anything else, was the truth that stayed with me as I sat alone that night, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside me. He had never respected me. Not once. Not when I gave him money for the wedding. Not when I visited them and offered advice about the children. Not when I complimented his new job or asked about his father's vineyard. It had always been surface. Tolerated. Not welcomed. And now that truth had a voice. And a language. And a home in my mind. The next morning, I found myself writing again. Not a letter this time. Not a transcript. Just notes. Thoughts. What does it mean to be a father who outlives his usefulness? What does it mean to be mocked in a language you love? I didn't cry. That would have felt melodramatic. But I sat there longer than I planned. Pen in hand. Paper on the desk. Memories flooding in. I thought about my wife, who would have heard that laughter and immediately cut it down with one sharp sentence. She had been strong, unflinching. French herself from alls. She would have hated Nathan. She would have hated all of it. And then I thought about Camille, and how far she had drifted. Would she care if she knew? Would she believe me? Or would she defend him? I didn't want to test it. Not yet, but the seed had been planted. And it was growing. I've never believed in revenge. Not the flashy kind that burns everything down. No, I've always preferred the kind that looks like coincidence, the kind that requires patience, planning, and a very long memory. The kind where you smile at your opponent, shake his hand, and thank him for his hospitality, all while knowing that in the background, the board is already shifting beneath his feet. After the dinner at Nathan's house, after the laughter in French and the wine-soaked insults, I let a few days pass. Just enough time for him to believe I hadn't noticed. Enough for his parents to return to their estate and for Camille to settle back into routine. Then I made a few calls. Stillwater, where I live, isn't a large place. Even smaller is the network of people who matter, who understand business, investments, and who knows what about whom. I started with Thomas Gilroy, a retired banker who now spent most of his time golfing and making introductions for favors. He'd once tried to recruit me into a joint venture that failed spectacularly after I walked away. We had history. He owed me one. I invited him for coffee. I need to know about a family, I said, once we were seated. French. Luc and Marianne Lemaitre. They own something in wine, something in import-export. They've been spending more time in the States lately. Thomas didn't even blink. The Lemaitres, he said, as if I'd asked him about the weather. Yes, I know of them. They run a boutique vineyard outside Aix-en-Provence. Export mostly to the U.S., some to Asia. Recently started talks with domestic distributors. Smart, connected, smug as hell. Why? Curiosity, I said. Family ties. He smirked. They're looking for investors. I heard they've got some legal headaches with expansion. Old French money meets new American red tape. You want me to ask around? No, I said. I want you to make a call to someone you trust, someone they wouldn't recognize. I want to invest quietly, through someone else. A modest share, just enough to get eyes in the room. Thomas leaned back and gave me a long, thoughtful look. You're not trying to bankrupt them, are you? No, I replied. Nothing so dramatic. Just a seat at the table. He nodded slowly. All right, I know just the man. Within 2 weeks, the wheels were turning. A discreet LLC formed in Wyoming. Funds transferred from one of my older accounts. A quiet introduction through a third party. A few signatures on the right papers, and just like that, I was a silent partner in the Lemaitres' business. They had no idea, and that was how I wanted it. Camille called a few days later, just after dinner. I could hear the sound of dishes clinking in the background, the faint echo of children in another room. She sounded upbeat, full of the casual energy of someone who thought life was gently unfolding in her favor. Dad, she said, you'll never believe it. Nathan's parents landed a huge new partner. Some American firm, I think. Private. Wealthy. They're going to expand into the U.S. market officially. A new distribution deal. It's huge. I smiled at the wall. Really? I said. That's impressive. Yeah, it's going to change everything. They were so excited. Nathan's been involved too. He's acting like he negotiated the whole thing. You should see him. He thinks he's becoming a wine mogul. I chuckled politely. Well, I said, I hope it works out. Me too, she said. Maybe one day we'll be sipping Lemaitre wine at some fancy Napa estate. Maybe. After we hung up, I poured myself a drink. A small one. Just enough to feel the warmth. They had no idea. The call from Nathan came later that week. I was fixing a broken hinge in the garage when my phone buzzed. Patrick, he said, his voice slick as ever. Hope I'm not catching you during your gardening or pipe cleaning or whatever it is you do. I grunted. Just a bit of housework. Listen, just wanted to tell you the big news myself. My parents just signed the deal. New partner in the business. Some serious players now. We're talking multi-million-dollar expansion potential. You'd love the pitch deck, though I doubt it makes much sense if you're not in finance. Maybe not, I said. He laughed. Anyway, you probably don't even know half the terms. But hey, you know how to make a good roast chicken. That's what matters. I let the silence linger. Then I said, I'm sure it'll be a great success. Oh, absolutely, Nathan replied. The best part? We've been told the new partner is very hands-off. Doesn't interfere. Just wants a share. That's ideal, I said. But sometimes those types are watching more than you think. He laughed again. Sure. Anyway, just thought I'd call the old man and share the good news. Don't forget to celebrate us this weekend, yeah. I said I would. Then I hung up and sat down on the old stool by my workbench. Nathan thought he was rising. Thought he was moving into circles above mine. He didn't know that I'd already arrived. And now I was inside. Not to destroy, but to understand. To watch. And when the moment came to act, the first draft of the letter was too polite. The second, too sharp. By the third, I found the tone I was looking for, neutral, formal, with just enough weight in the phrasing to unsettle anyone reading between the lines. I didn't sign it as Patrick. I signed it as my alternate identity, the name under which I had purchased a quiet share in the Lemaitre family business through the LLC Thomas had helped me build. It wasn't entirely fake. It was legal, just separate. A name pulled from my mother's lineage, forgotten to most. One I'd never used except for signing the occasional investment paper when I needed discretion. Dear Monsieur and Madame Lemaitre, I hope this letter finds you well. As a recent minority investor in your esteemed business venture, I wanted to express both my appreciation for your ongoing efforts in growing your operation and my enthusiasm for the direction the company appears to be taking under your stewardship. I will be passing through your region next week on other business, but would very much like the opportunity to meet with you and your family while I'm in town. Nothing overly formal, simply an introduction, a shared meal perhaps, and an opportunity to see the people behind the work. I would be particularly interested in meeting your extended family, including any active stakeholders and family representatives, particularly your son, and his wife and children if they are available. I've heard a great deal about them. Please let me know what day might suit you. I will arrange my travel schedule accordingly. Warm regards, L.S. Moreau. I had the letter printed on fine paper, slipped it into an envelope with a subtle watermark, and mailed it through an international courier. It would arrive in 2 days. That gave them time. Time to read it. Time to reread it. Time to think. And time to decide, would they call me? For the next 48 hours, I watched my phone with the quiet vigilance of someone playing chess. Not checking it obsessively, just enough to know when the silence was still intact. I knew how long it would take to make its way into their hands, to be opened, unfolded, and read in their elegant, whitewashed villa outside AIXN province. By the end of the second day, Camille called. Dad, she said, her voice tinged with curiosity. Did you hear about my in-laws getting some kind of letter from a business partner? I kept my tone even. No. What sort of letter? They wouldn't say exactly. But Nathan said his parents got a formal request from one of their American partners. Some guy with a French-sounding name. Moreau? I said, non-committally. And he wants to meet everyone, including Nathan, and me, and the kids, if possible. Says he's passing through and would love to have dinner. I don't know, Dad. The whole thing feels strange. Why would a business investor want to meet all of us? I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Maybe he's old-fashioned, I said. Nathan says he sounds a bit controlling. like he expects people to jump just because he wrote it on nice paper. I smiled. So will you meet him? I think so, Camille said. Nathan's parents are a little unsettled. They say it's unusual, but they don't want to offend a money man, especially one with no public history. They've been trying to look him up online, but there's almost nothing. It's like he came out of nowhere. Sometimes the most interesting people do. She laughed. You sound like a novelist. Maybe I missed my calling. Anyway, if this dinner happens, I'll let you know. Could be fun. You'd get a kick out of seeing Nathan squirm. I just might. They didn't call me. At least, not directly. But by the end of the week, I received a letter. Elegant stationery. Carefully worded. Monsieur Moreau, we would be honored to receive you at our home on the evening of the 23rd. A formal dinner will be arranged, and the entire family will be present, as per your request. Please inform us of your arrival details. We look forward to meeting you in person. Luc Lemaitre, I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. So, they had agreed. And they had done what I expected, invited Nathan and Camille, probably under the pretense of needing to show unity, to demonstrate professionalism. The last thing they would want is to appear fractured in front of a mysterious investor. But what I wanted to know now is simple. Would Camille recognize me when I walked through the door as someone else? And what would Nathan do? The game had begun. The following days felt like the quiet before a storm. Every detail was now a preparation. I ordered a suit, tailored to precision, in a darker shade than I normally wore. Understated. Elegant. The kind worn by men who don't speak much but are heard when they do. I scheduled my arrival for the afternoon of the 23rd, just enough time to check into a local and under the Moreau name. That morning, I reviewed my notes. Every document I had about their vineyard, their exports, the legal quirks of French-American distribution law, I read it twice. If I was going to sit at their table as Moreau, I had to be Moreau. I would speak softly, measuredly. I would reveal nothing too soon. I would listen, but I wouldn't forget, because this dinner wasn't just about presence. It was about power, about showing them that a man they had mocked now held a seat they hadn't seen coming. I also took time to think carefully about Camille. I wasn't doing this to punish her. She hadn't meant to offend me, and perhaps she truly hadn't understood what had happened that night. But I needed her to see, to understand who I really was and what her husband and his parents truly were. The idea of her seeing me dressed as a man she didn't recognize, introduced by a false name, discussing contracts and finances with the ease of someone who had navigated those waters for decades, it wasn't about spectacle. It was about revelation. If Camille had ever wondered who her father really was, now she would know. Nathan would panic. Not immediately. He would hold his composure, keep smiling, nod politely. But inside, he would churn, because he would recognize me far too late. Not just my face or my voice, but my mind. He would realize that the man he had laughed at, the man he thought he understood, had walked into his family's sanctuary and rearranged the furniture. That thought kept me up at night in the best possible way. I spent the night before the dinner going over the final pieces. I memorized financial data, reviewed internal memos, refreshed my understanding of the firm's distribution plans. I wasn't going to gloat. That wasn't the point. But I was going to be undeniable. And if any of them wanted to speak in French that night, I'd be more than ready. This wasn't just a dinner. It was the beginning of something new, something I now controlled. The phone rang just after noon. Nathan. I let it buzz for a few seconds, long enough to imagine him pacing somewhere, rehearsing a script in his head. Then I answered. Hello, Patrick. Hi, it's Nathan. His voice had that affected calm, the kind that pretends things are fine while praying they'll stay that way. Yes, Nathan. Everything all right? Yeah, just calling about tonight. Look, I just wanted to say, we're meeting this investor guy for dinner, right? This Monsieur Moreau? The one my parents are kind of nervous about. So I've heard. He cleared his throat. So I thought maybe it'd be better if you didn't come. Not to be rude. Just, you know how my parents are. And it's going to be a very formal dinner. We don't want any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Yeah, this guy might expect a certain kind of, I don't know, atmosphere. Professionalism. I see, I said. And you think I'd disrupt that? No, not like that. I just think it's best if the people who are directly involved in the business handle the introductions. I appreciate the concern, Nathan, I said, letting the pause stretch a moment too long. But I've already made arrangements. I'll get there on my own. He hesitated. Oh, you've already, right? Well, all right then. Just try to, keep things smooth. Of course. I hung up before he could stumble into another sentence. The restaurant sat on the edge of the city, nestled in an old stone building converted into a space of glass, chrome, and soft lighting. It was the sort of place where you reserved weeks in advance, where the waiter didn't bring menus until he'd introduced the origin of the wine list. Where meals were more than food, they were theater. They arrived together. Luke and Marianne in the front, arms linked. Nathan just behind them, tense but smiling, holding Camille's hand. Camille looked lovely, unsure, but composed. She scanned the room, likely searching for someone already seated. Someone wealthy. Someone unknown. The maitre d' met them at the door with an impeccable bow. Bienvenue. Monsieur Moreau is already waiting. This way, please. They followed in silence. Down the corridor. Past other tables. Toward the private dining room tucked behind frosted glass. The maitre d' opened the door. And there I sat. In a dark suit. Crisp white shirt. A glass of wine untouched before me. They all froze. No one said a word. Nathan's jaw moved slightly, but no sound came. Camille blinked. Luke and Marianne stared, first at me, then at the maitre d', then back at me again. I stood slowly. Bonsoir, I said. Thank you for coming. They didn't understand. Not yet, but they would. The silence that followed was a silence I had waited for, thick, brittle, the kind that sits between people like a pane of glass. No one moved. Nathan was the first to speak. Is this some kind of joke? Luke took a step forward, his eyes darting between me and the table setting. Monsieur Moreau? Yes, I said simply. I gestured toward the seats. Please, sit. They obeyed, almost by instinct, guided not by clarity but by discomfort. Camille looked at me the longest before sitting, her eyes searching mine for a clue. I thought you were coming later, she murmured. I've been here a while, I said. Just enjoying the wine. No one touched their glasses. I took my seat again. The waiter appeared to pour for the rest, unaware of the tension thickening with each slow movement. He asked if we were ready for the first course. I nodded. When he left, I leaned slightly forward. Let's not waste the evening with confusion. You're not Moreau, Luke said. His voice was tight. Accusatory. I am, I said. At least legally. I own 12% of your company through an LLC registered under the Moreau name. It's perfectly legitimate. All the paperwork is filed. I have receipts, contracts, bank transfers. I'm sure your lawyer could verify them. Marianne's face had gone pale. Her hand shook as she lifted her wineglass. Why? Camille whispered. She looked like she wanted to be angry, but couldn't yet find a place for it. I turned to her. Because one night at your house, your husband and his parents laughed at me in a language they assumed I didn't understand. Because they treated me like I was invisible, like I was beneath them. Because I wanted them to know who I really am. Nathan scoffed. So this is revenge? No, I said. It's revelation. You lied, he snapped. You deceived us. You set a trap. No, I said again. I made an investment. You ignored who I was. You never asked. You assumed. Luke leaned back, his face unreadable. Marianne looked ready to leave. This is not how business is done, she said sharply. Neither is mockery, I replied. The waiter arrived with the first course, a delicate scallop dish in a white truffle foam. He set it down without a word, sensing the mood. When he left, the room filled with the clink of cutlery, though no one ate. I picked up my fork, cut into the scallop. Tasted it. Delicious, I said. Marianne pushed her plate slightly away. Luke studied me like a man who had been handed a map written in a foreign script. Camille kept looking between us, searching for something familiar in a face she thought she knew. Nathan tried to recover. All right. So you're Moreau. You're a partner. That still doesn't change anything about what we're doing. We have our plans, this expansion, our branding, our client targets. You won't stop that. I have no intention of interfering, I said. Not yet. What does that mean? It means I'll be watching. Watching for what? For patterns. For decisions. For things that don't align with my values. Luke's expression darkened. You speak as if you're more than just a silent investor. Perhaps silence is relative. No one laughed. I took another bite. You're enjoying this, Nathan said. You think this is clever. No, I said. I think it's necessary. Camille finally found her voice. You could have told me. Would you have believed me? She didn't answer. You said you wanted to understand who I really am. Now you do. The waiter returned for the second course. Filet mignon with a red wine reduction. Again I ate. No one else did. So what now? Marian asked. Her voice was tight, composed, but brittle. Now, I said, we have dinner. And afterward, I go back to being a partner in your business. You can decide what to do with that. Luke cleared his throat. This won't go away. Neither will I. The meal continued in silence. Not comfortable. Not polite. Just silence, the kind that settles when the ground beneath everyone's feet has shifted. Dinner ended without a toast. No final exchange of pleasantries. No warm handshakes. Just a lingering discomfort, a room emptied slowly of words and warmth. The staff moved about carefully, clearing dishes with the silence of undertakers. Camille had barely touched her food. Her fork rested where it had been placed, her wine glass still full. Nathan's eyes burned with resentment, darting between me and her, then back to the table, as if hoping something would change if he stared hard enough. Luke and Marian were the first to leave. They stood with stiff backs and nods so curt they felt like accusations. Marian didn't say a word to me. Luke mumbled something about needing to check on a delivery. But even then, his glance toward Nathan was sharp. Flaming. The door closed behind them. Nathan pushed back his chair harder than necessary, the scrape loud and jarring. Camille flinched. Well, congratulations, he said, standing. You managed to humiliate my family. I hope you're proud. I stood calmly. I didn't humiliate anyone, Nathan. They did that themselves. Right, he snapped. Just showed up with your fake name and your smug little grin. Playing games. It's not a game. It's a correction. He turned toward Camille. And you knew, didn't you? Camille's head snapped up. What? You knew this was coming. You had to. He must have told you something. You were in on it. Are you serious? She asked, stunned. Nathan, I didn't know anything. I called him after your parents got the letter. I thought it was weird too. But you didn't say anything, he barked. You didn't tell me you thought it was strange. You just let it happen. Because I didn't think he was him. Not like this. Not with that name. I thought it was someone else. Oh, right. Just like that. All of a sudden your father's some secret investor with connections and lawyers and fake companies. But you didn't ask him about it? You just forgot. Camille stood slowly, her voice low and measured. You're shouting at me like I'm the one who insulted him. Like I did something wrong. You let me walk into a trap. You set the trap, she said. 3 years ago. You said it when you started talking about him like he was some irrelevant old man. When you laughed at him. When you acted like his kindness came with stupidity. Oh, please. No, she said, her voice rising. You don't get to turn this on me. He stepped forward. Not enough to touch her, but enough that I saw something in his posture I hadn't seen before. Something that made my hands twitch. Don't, I said quietly. Nathan turned toward me. Or what? Or we'll leave. Now. He hesitated. Camille looked between us. Then she reached for her purse. Let's go, Dad. The air outside was cool, heavy with the scent of rain and stone. The street was quiet, the restaurant's lights warm behind us, but distant now. I walked beside her in silence for a while, letting the sound of our steps settle. Are you all right? I asked. I think so, she said. I just didn't expect tonight to be this. Neither did I. She gave a small, ironic laugh. No, I think you planned it perfectly. I glanced at her. I meant the part where you got caught in the middle. She didn't answer right away. Then, why didn't you ever tell me about France? About your business. Because you never asked. She looked at me startled. You came home with your degree, moved in with Nathan, got your job, had the kids. You had your life. I didn't want to insert myself into it like some bragging relic. But you taught me French. Yes, I taught you enough to pass high school exams. I didn't expect you'd forget it all. She winced. I didn't forget. I just never needed it. Until that dinner, I said. She nodded. We walked a few more steps. What did they say? That night? In French. What did they say about you? I inhaled slowly. Nathan's father said I looked like a man who thought a clean shirt made him interesting. His mother said I was proof Americans had no dignity after retirement. Nathan joked that maybe I could wash dishes while they drink. Camille stopped walking. Her mouth opened, then closed again. You heard all of that? I understood every word. She covered her mouth with her hand. And you didn't say anything? No. Why? Because I wanted to see how deep the well went. Because I needed to know if the man my daughter married was really that arrogant or just ignorant. We stood under a street lamp. I should have known, she said. I should have defended you. You weren't supposed to. Not then. She looked up at me. And now? Now, I said, you know. And that changes everything. We kept walking. She was quiet beside me, her steps slow, thoughtful. The sidewalk stretched beneath the glow of yellow streetlights, the city distant but hushed, like it too was listening. I feel like I've been living in a story someone else was writing, she said after a while. And tonight someone ripped the last page out and replaced it with something entirely different. That's what truth does. She gave a dry laugh. You sound like a philosopher now. I had a lot of time to think, watching everyone underestimate me. Was it lonely? Sometimes. But not always. I learned how people show you who they really are when they think you can't understand them. Like Nathan. Like Nathan. We reached the corner where the old bookstore used to be, now a cafe with vintage lamps in the window and soft jazz playing inside. Did you ever think I would turn out like them? She asked. No, I said. But I thought you'd see it sooner. She nodded slowly. I think part of me did. But I didn't want to. I wanted to believe he was just tired. Or stressed. Or joking badly. You gave him excuses. I gave him room to get worse. We stood in silence. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at her coat. What do I do now? She asked. You start over. You don't have to know everything right now. Just take the first step. She nodded. Can I stay with you tonight? Of course. We turned, headed toward my car. Behind us, the city kept glowing. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had someone walking beside me who really saw me. And I saw her too. The first night Camille stayed in the guest room, she barely spoke. She unpacked nothing, just set her bag by the bed and sat on the edge for hours. I made tea and left it outside her door. She didn't drink it, but I heard her moving inside, the rhythm of pacing, of someone letting silence unravel thoughts. By the second morning, she was sitting at the kitchen table before I even came downstairs. Morning, she said softly. Morning. She was wearing one of my old university sweatshirts. It hung off her like a blanket. There was a calm in her face I hadn't seen in years. The kind that comes after a storm, clarity maybe. Not peace yet, but a moment where you could breathe. He hasn't called, she said. I nodded. He might not. She sipped her coffee. Do you think he's waiting for me to go back? Or he's trying to figure out how to spin this into your fault? She looked at me. He's good at that. Yes, he is. 3 days passed. She helped around the house like she'd never left. She cooked twice, watered the garden, sorted through old boxes in the attic and laughed when she found her childhood sketchbooks. We sat on the back porch one night and watched the rain come in, not speaking much, just watching. I noticed how quiet she'd become, how still. Not broken, not panicked, just still, like a woman finding her footing in a room she used to know. The 5th morning, she woke early, made breakfast, wrote a list of groceries, did the laundry. At noon, she stood in the hallway and asked, Do you think he'll show up today? I think he's debating whether he can still win. And if he thinks he can't, he won't come. But he did. At 3:12 p.m., the doorbell rang. He didn't text, didn't call, just appeared. When I opened the door, Nathan stood on the porch in a pressed shirt and expensive shoes, holding nothing. His hair was styled, his expression unreadable. "Is she here?" "Yes," I said. I didn't step aside. "I want to talk to her." "You should have called. Would you have answered?" I tilted my head. "I'm not the one who disappeared." He didn't reply, just stood there, jaw tight, trying to look calm and failing. Camille appeared behind me. "I'll talk to him," she said. I stepped back. She walked past me and joined him outside. They stood on the porch together. I stayed near the window, not hiding, just present. "I don't know what else to say," Nathan began. "Your father ruined everything." Camille didn't flinch. "He exposed everything. There's a difference. You don't get it. My parents are furious. They feel betrayed. They should. They betrayed him first." Nathan's voice sharpened. "This doesn't have to be permanent. We can fix it, but only if he backs out. If he sells his share." Camille blinked. "You're serious? We can't have him watching everything we do, waiting for us to mess up. We need freedom to run the business." "So your solution is to blackmail me with our marriage?" He looked away. "You're telling me that the only way we stay together is if my father gives up something that's legally his, something he earned? It's the only way to move forward." She shook her head. "No, it's the only way you keep pretending nothing ever happened." "Camille, no," she said firmly. "If you loved me, you'd be apologizing. You'd be trying to understand why this hurt me, why your silence hurt me, why your pride keeps making everything worse." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "I'm staying here," she said. "I need time, maybe more than that. So that's it? If the only way I can be your wife is by betraying my father, then yes. That's it." She walked back into the house. I didn't look at Nathan, just closed the door behind her. She didn't cry. She didn't break. She just stood there, her back straight, and exhaled. "Thank you for not saying anything," she said. "I didn't need to." She smiled faintly. He looked scared. He should be. We spent the rest of the day quietly. She helped me organize some files in the office, sorted through papers with focus, asking questions here and there. We didn't talk about Nathan. That evening, she made dinner. Simple food, the kind she grew up on. We sat at the table like we used to, long before any of this began. "I think I want to go back to school," she said. "School. Something new. A fresh start. Maybe law. I don't know. I just want to build something that's mine." I nodded. "I'll support whatever you choose." She paused. "I don't know how long I'll stay here, but I need to figure out who I am without him, without the life I thought I was supposed to have. You're welcome here as long as you need." She smiled. "Thanks, Dad." And for the first time since she came home, her shoulders dropped. Just a little. Just enough.